Hey, Guy Powell here, and welcome to the next episode of The Backstory on Marketing and AI. And if you haven't already done so, please visit prorelevant.com and sign up for all of these episodes and podcasts. I am the author of the recently released book, The Post-COVID Marketing Machine: Prepare Your Team to Win. And you can find out more information on this at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. So today, the big question on the minds of CMOs, entrepreneurs, and the C-suite is how will AI impact their activities, especially in their marketing department, and even not just their marketing department, but also their agencies. Well, let's see if we can help a little bit. Today, we are going to share some insights with Hal Smith, and he is an expert on AI marketing and digital marketing, and certainly how to drive revenue through e-commerce. And that's critical for so many businesses. Everything nowadays is sold online, and if you're not doing that right, then this is definitely a way to figure out how to do it right. And it doesn't matter whether you're a small business or a medium size or a large business. AI, digital marketing can certainly be a huge differentiator for you. So as I said, we're interviewing Hal Smith. He is the founder of H Street Digital, and he is an adept entrepreneur cultivating business growth through data-driven digital advertising. He focuses on scaling leads and new customers for consumer brands. His leadership propels the company with triple-digit growth annually. Now, that is something that's just awesome. And some of our clients, that growth is everything. And triple-digit growth and what he's been able to achieve are just something to marvel. So Hal ensures H Street Digital empowers brands to scale their customers profitably, and his strategic prowess ensures businesses thrive amid the ever-shifting digital landscape. And that is so true. The digital landscape is changing. I don't know if it lasts even a day. I think we'll be lucky. But anyways, Hal, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Guy.
Absolutely. So looking forward to your knowledge and understanding what you're doing. But before we do that, so tell us your backstory on how you got involved with marketing and AI and digital and things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting background. First job out of college, I actually worked on a political campaign, and it was a presidential campaign. So it was quite possibly the most experience you could get in the shortest amount of time as it relates to advertising, because presidential campaigns are the biggest advertising campaigns. I mean, really in the world. I mean, there are big global marketing campaigns, but in terms of the amount of spend in that amount of time, it's really the most you're going to do. Also within that too comes the strategy and tactics that are applied to that. It's very complex, right? Because you have very different voter groups that you're trying to target with very specific messages. You have to do a lot in terms of your sophistication around audience targeting. And then also too, there's fundraising. So you have to have a lot of sophistication in terms of how you're raising money from, what are called like grassroots donors. And then it's a very complicated setup because you're basically creating everything in about 7 months. And so you have to be very good about how to do that. And so that experience, first year out of college, was just, it was amazing. Now, that being said, not necessarily that passionate about politics. So that kind of leads into, what the rest of my career was, which, I did that campaign. I did some political consulting working for a bunch of different, types of candidates. So like gubernatorial, senatorial, congressional candidates. I did that for a bit and then helped an old boss of mine start up a performance advertising agency that worked for more Fortune 500 type companies. And I did that for a couple of years and helped scale that up. When I left, it was employee number 4, left it when it was about 50 people. And then I went actually worked back in the political space for a bit for myself. I spun up, the company originally, then did that for a cycle. And then I actually shut it down, went in-house with the client, helped spin up their ads team. And I did that for about a year. And then I realized two important things. One is I didn't want to work in politics anymore. And then the second is I could not stand having a boss. So I decided to start up the agency again and really, bootstrapped it, just me and a laptop, then a couple of contractors, then a couple more contractors, and kept just building it and building it, getting more clients, more contractors, then converted people over to employees to where now we have, it's 20 people, we have 10 clients, and it's a pretty good, I would say for this space, like a smaller to mid-sized agency, and we're doing really well. Like we're growing fast, and we're doing great work for our clients.
Yeah, fantastic. So, what else can you tell us about H Street Digital?
Yeah, so I guess one thing in terms of where we're positioned, so we work with 8-figure brands. So brands are typically doing more than 10 million revenue that are e-commerce, direct consumer focused brands. And our kind of like our promise and goal is to get them so they're generating more than $1 million a month in revenue from advertising. And so our kind of key here and our secret sauce really sits around the scaling process for advertising campaigns to allow those campaigns to drive that amount of revenue efficiently. So we're actually driving, good revenue that's profitable, and it's worked out really well. We've done that for a number of brands now and really seen them grow, and as a result, we've grown ourselves. And I think too, to kind of the last point of your question on the AI side. So obviously, the last 2 years have been very different in digital marketing. There's been a lot of changes, but the biggest one being AI. So currently, what we're doing today is thinking of AI solutions for our clients to build efficiencies in how they operate, and also increase their level of productivity. And then the second part is for the agency itself is how do we build leverage within the agency, leveraging AI ourselves, right? And there's so many opportunities across a lot of different areas within the agency, and then also for these e-commerce brands that we're working with. And so it's a great topic to be covering because I mean, everyone knows this. AI is radically changing everything. Like we're in the AI world today across all businesses, but marketing especially, it is a new world for marketing. And you know, I kind of caution against the fear I think people have about losing jobs because I actually think it creates significantly more opportunity. It's just the key is like understanding these AI tools and how to leverage them effectively to build efficiencies and actually create significantly more value.
Yeah, yeah, and I kind of agree with you as well. When you think about, is AI going to take jobs? I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is a few, but I have a feeling that it's probably going to create significantly more as people then move to be able to figure out how to use AI and what have you. Going back a ways, it used to be office automation and computers and what have you, and the size and the productivity of offices, so to speak, has risen significantly, but the number of employees and what have you are much larger than they were before. And so
Right.
in this case, it's going to be, I can't imagine it's going to be any less or any different than that. So what are some of the cool strategies that you're using to really help those customers grow?
Yeah, I think it sits in a number of areas. So maybe I can kind of segment this and I'll speak to each of them as well as some of these tools that we're using if your listeners kind of want to look them up or research them. So let's say one, for example, there's this company we're working with, and we're actually getting this onboarded with the client right now. It's called Rep AI. So what Rep AI is an AI chatbot that sits on e-commerce websites that basically answers not only frequently asked questions, but a little bit more nuanced questions. And it's really cool because, typically with most chat support features, it's a like a workflow bot where it's like if customer asks this question, then give this answer. And it's very kind of rigid and you have to spend a lot of time working on it. Instead, with this tool, you can just upload the website basically and train the AI agent on the website itself. You can take any content related to the brand, just dump it into the same place, and it just reads everything and understands it. And then for a relatively short amount of time, like 30 minutes to an hour, you can basically send it different prompts and really stress test its knowledge. And then from that, it's fully functional chatbot feature that is able to answer all these questions. And it's really, really cool. It's a really low cost and it's really effective. So, and then the coolest thing about it too is they have really good analytics on the effectiveness of the AI, which they use as a positive reinforcement, like feedback loop, to basically tell the AI if it's doing the right job and if these prompts are working well, if these answers to those prompts are working well, or if they're not. And it also ties it into the true kind of business KPI, which is like revenue. Are these conversations actually generating more revenue by closing customers and actually getting them to purchase? So that's a really cool one. Another one that, is kind of in the same vein is this company called Gorgeous. And so like historically, they kind of came in as a customer support platform. However, they built out lots and lots of AI-based automations within the platform just to make it much more efficient to manage customer complaints or manage these different workflows that you would use in engaging with customers. And so it just has radically improved and made the whole customer support and customer engagement process just much more efficient because of these tools they've, inserted AI into basically. On the creative side, there are a lot of tools coming out. So, the one that everyone uses today, especially smaller startup businesses, is Canva. Well, Canva now has lots of different options for AI, generative content, where it makes, any content that you're creating much more easier. So if you're doing some type of proposal pitch, if you're doing an ad, anything like that, they have AI features now just to create those much easier, and it makes things radically more simple. On that front too, there's other platforms. One is called Atria, which is it's kind of like a spy tool. So Atria basically will go and aggregate competitor ads in one platform. So you can go do a lot of research on your competitors and see what types of ads are running. But Atria makes it much more seamless by leveraging AI. So you can give it prompts. So it looks for specific types of ads or specific types of concepts. And then it gives you recommendations on what you should be doing in your ads based on your brand. And so that just makes that whole research process for our creatives, like our team, significantly faster and easier.
Mm.
Outside of that too, I mean, obviously we use Chat GPT 4, I guess now, a lot, right? If we're trying to create a proposal and we're trying to get these kind of main bullet points done, we'll just feed it some information, figure out how it's kind of thinking about that information, how it organizes it, and then also too any kind of recommendations it has in terms of like how to write out specific topics. And then we'll kind of use that as this ongoing working process just to make what we're trying to do much more clear, much more effective, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it seems like there's kind of two kinds of AI, and I am really amazed at how fast companies, online service providers, so to speak, have built AI into their offerings. And
Yeah.
you mentioned, Canva, but there's just about every one of them always has a little AI thing over here. You click on that, and man, it is incredible what it can do. And so that right there, from a creative or whatever you're trying to do in marketing or even outside of marketing, but just for marketing, certainly it's like it is really, a huge help. The other one though is as well, just like you're talking about, is how to use Chat GPT and GPT-4 and then 4.0, and being able to really drive, the stuff that you're doing every day, but that could just be faster because you have this new tool out there, and it is really and truly amazing.
Yeah. And I think one other thing that we do more and we lean on more heavily because we're a performance agency and we're very focused on the data in most simple terms, is leveraging AI in terms of modeling and building projections and predictions and better understanding, correlations between ad spend and revenue. And there are a lot of really cool platforms that have made AI kind of the forefront in how they're running it, which has reduced a lot of the cost in terms of using analytics. And has built just a ton of leverage for us as an agency, because historically to do this type of modeling or data analysis, you'd have to hire a data analyst, and who would also have relatively high salary, and that'd have to be something in house. And then now you can pay $1,000 to $2,000 a month for one of these software platforms that does it all for you, and it's all automated or done through AI. So like an example, there's one company that's I think it's only about 2 or 3 years old, but it's called Prescient AI. And they do a really good job with what's called mixed media modeling. And so mixed media modeling is, basically drawing that correlation between spend and revenue across a lot of different marketing channels. And that's heavily AI driven, and it's a low cost option, and it's also pretty accurate. And it's really good on the projection side as well. And then for the ad side, in terms of data, it's funny, because I've been doing this for a bit, when we started out, running ad campaigns, the best way I can explain it is we would run these complicated campaigns that we would build in Excel spreadsheets, and then we would pull them down off the platform, put them into pivot tables in Excel and do all this data analysis. It's very manual and it took hours to do. A lot of that has now been built into the platforms using these kind of machine learning AI algorithms. So now, you go on Facebook, for example, it's actually a very simple structure to setting up campaigns. A lot of that is now kind of baked into the platform. And so all this very technical knowledge and experience I developed is kind of pointless today. And other people can kind of go on and use the same tools as me and be as effective. And so what I've learned too with that is recognizing the kind of power or leverage that AI has within any platform, and then learning how to best use it, right? And so now, like a lot of what we do is try to best understand how these algorithms are working, or how this machine learning works, or how AI like works generally within like an ad platform, and then working around that, or making sure we're feeding it the right information. And I think for advertising, that happens in two ways. One is the data that you're feeding into these platforms. And so that's generally through like pixels and what's being tracked from like website activity or purchase behavior, making sure that data pipeline is clean and it's also capturing as much data as possible. And then the second thing is on the creative side, making sure that, knowing these platforms are learning a lot about your creative and then your potential customers and how they're delivering ads. How do you become smarter and smarter about what creative you're putting into these platforms, knowing that you don't have a lot of control over the delivery of these ads, and that you're trying to train these algorithms on how to learn about the creative you're putting in it. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, those are some good suggestions. So what do you find that companies are doing wrong? As they're getting into their digital advertising and making mistakes, and instead of being as effective as you can help them to be.
yeah, so I like this question a lot because we're actually interviewing a media buyer this morning, and I asked them a question. I said, what is the biggest lie in performance advertising right now that everyone's going along with, or everyone believes? And his answer, which is really good, and something I totally agree with, which relates to this, is he said, people are assuming that the data that they're seeing is correct, and they're making decisions off of that data, believing that they have a sound strategy going forward. And so, what does that mean, and why does this matter with most companies? What I've found is most companies are not setting up the right infrastructure in terms of analytics to capture the right data. And then when they're feeding that data back into these ad platforms, they don't have that structure complete. So a lot of the data that's getting passed back is very incomplete, or they're missing tons of signal and
Mm.
what they're passing back. So these algorithm based, ad platforms are actually, you could consider that they're flying blind, or they're, shooting in the dark. Basically, they're actually not collecting enough signal to know where to be optimizing. And I see this for almost every single client that we've onboarded. They've had a lot of issues in their pixel setup, their analytics setup, and how they're collecting data and how they're passing that back to these ad platforms. So I'd say that is the biggest problem, because when you're so dependent on these algorithms to make the right decisions, except you're feeding it the wrong data, you're going way off track and people don't even know it.
Yeah, yeah. And I hate to say it, we do analytics. You talked about media mix modeling. We do that for much larger companies. And we probably spend 80% of our time getting the data in line. And
Hmm.
and if you get the data wrong, then you're absolutely, garbage in, garbage out. That applies everywhere. And
Yep.
so if you spend the smarts on getting the data right, it just makes a total difference on what you're going to get out. So and it's less so on the algorithm. It's much more so you have to invest in getting the data right.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else that you find that companies are doing wrong other than the data, or?
Well, I guess just a little bit outside of the AI topic here, but typically what we've seen in a lot of these e-com businesses, especially, right around that 10 million mark, is they haven't figured out the unit economics of their products. They haven't actually figured out what's a sustainable like marketing or advertising spend, and what is a sustainable return on ad spend or target customer acquisition cost. Um, I've now realized, going into this deeper and deeper, that's actually a very complex equation to try and figure out, because there are so many inputs and factors as part of that. And it's like, how much do you want to, you know, add to that equation, or how many variables you want to add in, and then how do you weigh them correctly, and then how do you actually figure out costs there, and then how do you put that into a good model. So most companies kind of have this, rough guess. They're like, we need a return on that ad spend of 4x, or we need a CAC here of $20. And when you kind of like start asking questions to dig into it, I found this 10 out of 10 times, they actually don't have answers for you. And so it's like, well, we're going to spend all this money for you and we're going to hit this target ROAS. And then, you actually don't know if it's going to be generating profit. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. That's kind of a core thing in what we do in terms of our onboarding, because, we're typically spending well over 6 figures with our clients a month. And, I feel much more comfortable if we're spending that amount of money and we actually know it's driving real growth for the business, as opposed to, a year from now, 6 months from now, they come back to us and like, wait a second, we got to shut everything down. So, yeah.
Yeah, how funny. I mean, same with us. I hate to say it. We were working with a bank and we said, well, what is the value of a new customer? And, if they, whatever their deposit level is, what's the value of that? Or, an insurance company, what is the value? How much profit do you get off of each insurance contract? And it amazes me that they don't know, that they truly do not know. And then to your point, we could generate, more revenue, or, just like you're doing, you're generating more revenue, you're getting them up to 1 million a month or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden they're losing more money than when they were smaller.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. It's tough. It's funny too. I actually, in the, previous agency I worked at, we had a big bank as a client. They, big global bank. I don't know if I should say their name, but it was that was really, really interesting, because I always had this kind of perception that I thought, working the campaign side, it's a mess, right? You're trying to basically build a business in 7 months, and it truly doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be profitable. You're effectively trying to raise a bunch of money and then spend that money as quickly as possible. It's kind of a very different way of approaching things. But it was always very chaotic and messy. And then I was like, this is a mess. I'm going to go on the corporate side, and then they've got to have stuff figured out. These are big, multinational brands, they're, Fortune 500 companies. And then I go there and you kind of look behind the curtain, and you realize it's also a mess. And so, and then I went into, the e-com, and because e-com is so difficult, I was like, these businesses got to get it. They got to have it figured out. Like they are, especially these startup businesses that have, like, let's say bootstrapped to a certain amount of revenue. It's like they have to be pretty smart, pretty sophisticated. They have to be pretty lean. They have to really know their numbers. And then, same thing. It's like you pull behind the curtain and it's all a mess too. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's so true, so true. And you would think that if they've got like a strong accounting team and a strong, controller and CFO in there, that they would actually have a really good understanding of what their costs are, so that, they can really see that, well, if I can scale my business up to 1 million a month, that I'm now going to really, double, triple, quadruple my profit because of that. And yet, man, oh man, sometimes it's hard to believe.
Yeah. One other interesting thing about that too, which might be a little off topic, but I think is a good point to talk about, is how much more net profit you can generate from paid activity. And so this is like a really hard concept for a lot of businesses to understand. Is I'll just give simple numbers for an example. So let's say you're spending $100 a month and you have uh, you know, let's say 5x return on ad spend. So that means you spend $100, you make $500. And so you're netting $400. And people say 5x return on ad spend is really good. We want to keep that going, right? However, if you spend, let's say, $10,000 a month and you're making, let's say 1.5x return on ad spend. So you're spending 10,000, you make 5,000, right? Or you make 15,000, but you're
Mm.
actually netting 5,000, right?
Hmm.
That 5,000 net is actually much higher in terms of net dollars actually going into the company and increasing profitability. However, that return on ad spend number is 1.5, and it seems much lower than the 5x that you're doing, right? that's a kind of constant problem we run into as well when we're talking to clients about scaling, because we're trying to show them this model where we're actually increasing your net dollars significantly at scale. However, that return on ad spend is actually lower, but you have to keep in mind, like we're trying to drive profit here. It's like net new dollars. And
Mm.
so at scale, even though the percentage is lower in terms of return on ad spend, it's actually much more net dollars in your for your company. That's always a hurdle for companies and people to kind of get over, which is interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It goes back to my MBA days and fixed costs versus variable costs and what have you. So yeah, absolutely. It is so funny how the same, it doesn't matter where you are in the industry, the same problems keep showing up, and you can optimize one area over here and you still got a mess over there. So yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for that. So what do you see as the big emerging kind of trends over the next couple years? I mean, obviously AI, but what do you see as kind of the emerging technologies that are really going to shape our industry?
Yeah, so I mean, one technology is platforms that facilitate global employment, especially for marketing agencies. So Deal is a really good example of that. So it's Deel. Um, but one thing I've noticed, we do this ourselves. Uh, in order to manage agency costs, you outsource a lot, right? So we do our reporting. We have a phenomenal team that's actually based in the Philippines. Our creative team is based out of Argentina. And we're paying them great, compensation for where they live. However, for us as an agency being the US, it works well for us in terms of profitability, right? But technology that allows the facilitation of those, like that collaboration, works really well for us. So like Deal, for example, Deal does like international background checks. It has international contracts. It has international payment systems, right? Um, but for marketing specifically, as I would say like cost decrease with like a lot of technology as well as with AI, in order to keep an agency, which is largely, a group of people, you do need to outsource more and more. I think,
Mm.
increasingly people will be having, international teams, and any technology that allows for that cross collaboration is going to improve things. Like we also use Asana, which is a project management platform that's really good for working with teams in multiple countries, multiple time zones. But I think that's gonna happen more and more. I mean, obviously it happens with big, corporations, but I think in marketing specifically, every team, a lot of other agency owners that I talk to, they all have international teams now. And it's really important to have that kind of tool stack that allows for that collaboration. So that's going to be a big one. I also think there's going to be increasingly more kind of I don't know how best to describe this, but people are gonna, I believe, be not necessarily like pure freelancers, but there's gonna be less and less time people spend at any specific company. And there's gonna be more people doing a hybrid role where maybe they're kind of full time at one company and then they have a lot of clients on the side. So there's just gonna be this like gradual kind of like very was it it's not like it's like fractional unemployment, but it's
Yeah.
just a lot of movement all the time. I think that's going to happen more so. I think it's going to happen with increasing frequency going into the future. So, one interesting thing about that is like, how do you build a business around that, knowing that your employees are going to be with you for a year or two? And I think that really goes down into building really good business like systems and processes where it's not necessarily dependent on one individual, but it's dependent on like someone with a certain skill set, just being able to fulfill that role for a certain amount of time and being able to go past that. And I think particularly in the agency space, there's always a lot of churn with employees anyway. We've been lucky to actually have our team, we actually have really high retention, but I do think it's something you have to hedge for. So
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it is uh I think the time that an employee is going to be with you, unless you're, and I don't know what you can do, but the amount of time that a single employee is going to be with you is going to get shorter and shorter, or and it and I think it's very hard for, especially for smaller companies, but even also for larger companies. But for smaller companies, it's harder to offer like a really strong growth path for them, because if the company is only so big and yet their capabilities are clearly outpacing the growth of the company, then there's also a mismatch there. And then on
Yep.
big companies, you're stuck in a little square in an HR matrix that kind of forces you. It says, no, 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 you can't be there. You have to be there for at least 3 years before you can move up to the next slot. And
Yep.
that also offers challenges. So I think you're right. There's going to be a lot more movement in employees as they realize that they can get more experience, more money, more value, and more knowledge, and also more excitement in what they're doing by moving around.
Yep. I think too, I mean, look, I actually haven't spent a whole lot of time in the corporate space, so I actually can't really speak to it or know it. But one kind of feeling I have too is there's going to be a lot more kind of emergent ways people work. So it's going to be like these kind of self-managing teams of
Mm,
teams that are working in these groups that are like part of like kind of bigger networks as opposed to this very hierarchical structured approach. I think that might have worked well for like just a different way of doing business, right? And I kind of see that as like being like that kind of linear development, like waterfall process, which like works well for like let's say factories or like big corporations, where I think a lot of companies have to be like really lean and kind of emergent in their approach, and so therefore they have to build teams around that and a team structure around that.
yeah, yeah. And you might be right. It might be that it is more for a manufacturing centric. You've got certain requirements for knowledge-based businesses, which is kind of what you and I are in, and a lot of things that are going on, in the offices is all about knowledge-based. So how do what is the right thing for the offices as opposed to those folks that want to be on the line and building something and getting their hands, right into, actually putting a car, so to speak, together or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, as much as I'd like to keep going, it looks like we're kind of a little bit out of time. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we close?
Um, let me. Well, I'm going to say one more thing about AI, and then I do have like something else I want to mention about the agency at least. I'll try to do this fast. Does that work?
No, no, that's fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That'd be
Yeah,
perfect.
the best thing I've found to think about AI is analogy, and I forget his name, but there's a grandmaster who when I think it was the original AI that basically beat the first grandmaster at chess. Like when that happened, then there's like this tournament where it's grandmasters versus the AI. AI won every single time. And then this grandmaster went and he put together a team of not grandmasters, but people that were pretty high ranking in terms of their chess score, and then gave them AIs to work with, and then set them up against this single AI agent, and they beat it, right?
Hmm.
And so the concept, I think most people need to think about with AI is how do you build teams of people leveraging AI? So it's not going to be pure like, it's not you know, 0 or 1. It's like, you fight AI and try to do it and be smarter than that, or you only use AI. It's like, how do you think of, training your team on how best to use AI? You're going to have the best advantage with that. And that wins. That wins every time. It's basically the, man and machine working together, right? Um, and then in terms of the agency, I would just say the only thing I want to say about us is, we are, always looking for potential new partners to be working with. If there are any like 8-figure brands that are looking to really kind of change the approach in terms of how they're doing media buying, performance advertising, and are looking to hit that goal for $8 million or more from their ecom, platform, typically Shopify a month. Definitely give us a shout. You can reach me, I mean, best on LinkedIn. So it's just Hal Smith, and you search Hal Smith in LinkedIn. You can just shoot me a message there and we can have a conversation. It's the first step. We always do a free audit. We'll give you an audit as well as our findings and what we think would work best for you for 30, 60, or 90 days. And you can take that and go bring it to another agency and go work with them or do it yourself. But we always like to give that first and see if, it might be a good partnership. So,
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, thanks for that. I do have one last question, and I always like to ask this. It's a little bit off. It's not off topic, but it's a little bit of a different dimension. And if you were going to give advice to a new and upcoming marketer, what would that be?
new and upcoming marketer, I would say learn how to learn because your ability to learn quickly is your most valuable asset for a marketer, especially in how quickly things change. And then also learn how to unlearn. And so what worked well 2 or 4 years ago is obsolete today. So you have to be okay letting those things go and then quickly learning like what's going to work best in this new context of how things are working today. And this landscape changes so quickly. You have to become really conscious of how you learn and how to become really effective at learning and learning quickly. And then it's just, letting go of the things that no longer apply and being okay with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. I think that makes sense, and I think you're right. It's having to be open to being able to quickly assimilate new methods. And I
Mhm.
really like your point too about having to disassimilate from the old
Yeah.
methods that are no longer appropriate. So
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. Hal, thank you so much. So where can people reach you again? What's your website? And
Yeah, so the website is the letter H Street Digital .co. And then, if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, so it's Hal Smith. And then if you search Hal Smith and H Street, you'll probably find me. And then you can also reach out to me on Twitter. So my handle is Hal, the number four ads. So Hal four ads.
fantastic. So hstreetdigital.co and then Hal Smith, of course, on LinkedIn. Hal, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Very informative, and AI is definitely something that's changing the world right now, and it's great to be right in the middle of it. So thank you. And for my audience, please visit marketingmachine.prorelevant.com for more information on my book, as well as to be able to download some excerpts on my book, but also then to sign up for more episodes. Thank you so much, Hal. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.